Hello students, welcome back. So this is in continuation with our previous video where I had been explaining to you people about industrial disputes. So let's just have a look at what are the causes of industrial disputes exactly. See, look at the first point over here. You have something known as economic causes. So economic causes is a situation where industrial disputes arise because of dissatisfaction with regards to the wages, or dissatisfaction with regards to the hours for which the laborer has to work, or dissatisfaction regarding the bonus. So with regards to any financial benefits that are due to the worker, if there is any kind of dissatisfaction, that is an industrial dispute due to economic causes. Moving on to the second point here, the industrial disputes due to political causes. So normally what happens is industrial disputes arises because, as I had already told you, many of the trade unions have affiliation to some political party or the other. So what these political parties will do is, since they are very much interested in the labor reforms, they will try to provoke these trade unions to bargain for better wages or better working conditions or better terms of employment. So because of this, kind of a dispute can come up between the workers or the trade unions and the management. The third point here, social causes. So these industrial disputes arise because of a certain low morale which some of the employees might be having in the society, or due to their lack of social values or norms. The fourth point here, technological causes. So because of technological causes, in case a new technology is introduced, there will come some kind of an insecurity for the workers. They will think that because technology has come in, their job is going to get affected. They will think that they will face job loss. Because of this job insecurity, they can come up with a dispute against the management. And technological causes can also be like, a new technology has come, a new kind of machinery has come. They are not knowing how to operate that machinery, so they are not able to adjust themselves to that change. So resistance to change, inability to accept new technology, or job insecurity, because of all these reasons also industrial disputes can arise. Then you have psychological causes. Psychological causes is where there is a conflict with the individual and organizational objectives. The individual will want something, but the organization is moving in another direction. So in this case, there will be a misunderstanding. And there can also be industrial disputes because of lack of that, their personality itself is pulling the employee down. The employee themselves have lack of motivation. The employee's personality and attitude problems are also there, due to which industrial disputes can arise. The next point, if you see here, it is talking about market situation. So market situation is a condition where the wages are not according to the level of inflation. So the prices are constantly rising, or there might be shortages for commodities. Because of constant rising prices, the employee feels that their wages are not sufficient to maintain a reasonable standard of living. So because of this also, they will try to negotiate for better packages with the management. Then the second last point, if you see here, it is speaking about the presence of unions. Whenever there is a union, a trade union in the organization, there are higher chances of industrial disputes arising. The number of trade unions which are there in the organization also determines the number of times industrial disputes arise. More number of trade unions are there means among those trade unions, they may start arguing with each other, or they may have misunderstandings with each other. And the strength of the trade union, okay, is it a militant workforce or is it a weak trade union? All these things also decides how frequently industrial disputes arise. Then you have equality of parties. Supposing both the management as well as the trade union are both equally strong people, then each one of these parties will think twice before they can get into a dispute with the other party, because they know there will be a lot of opposition. So because of this, whenever both the parties are strong, disputes might reduce. But even if disputes arise, because of their maturity and all those things, they will be able to sort it out well, and the industrial dispute will it will quell quickly. It will get uh, corrected quickly. But however, if one party is strong and the other party is weak, this is where industrial disputes arises more frequently. So when the workforce is more strong, they will start negotiating, they will start pressurizing the management to improve their terms and conditions of work. And they will threaten, if they don't improve their terms and conditions of work, they will they will engage in a strike. On the other hand, the management, if the management is strong, even in case an industrial dispute might occur, the management will easily be able to quell the rebellion, right? And in case the management is strong, ultimately the workers get compromised. So if this is the case, whenever one party compromises their interests towards the other party, resentment sets in. More amount of resentment, more frequently the industrial disputes can happen. And I had already told you in the previous slide over here, the way in which industrial dispute manifests itself. Whenever there is some kind of a conflict between two parties, that is the trade unions and the management, between the trade unions and their immediate supervisor, any kind of conflict between these two parties itself is called as an industrial dispute. And the results of this industrial dispute or the conflict will be, how does it get settled? One way is by way of collective bargaining, which we will see in a few minutes from now on. Then there are third party negotiations also, which we will have a look at, and strikes, which we have already seen in our previous video. Okay, let's have a look at what is understood by the term collective bargaining. So collective bargaining is a situation where representatives of the management and the labor, representatives of the management and the trade union, certain representatives from the trade union, they try to negotiate on certain terms of their employment contract. What are those terms on which they will try to negotiate? It could be regarding the wages, it could be regarding the hours of work, it could be regarding the any kind of bonus which is due to them, it could be regarding the profit sharing plans or something. So these are all some terms of the contract based on which negotiation can take place. And it's called as collective bargaining. Why do you call it as collective bargaining? It is because that when the negotiation happens, it happens between two groups and not between two individuals. One laborer from the trade union and one official from the top management will not negotiate. Certain representatives of the trade union, there will be somewhere about 6-7 representatives of a trade union which has membership of somewhere about 500 workers. Top management officials also may be many. There will be so many boards of directors. There will be about 20 or 30 of them. Among those people, around 7 or 8 of them will represent. So the representatives of the trade union and the representative of the boards of directors or the top management will sit together in the bargaining table and try to negotiate, talk, and try to come to an agreement. And another important feature of collective bargaining here is bargaining should happen in good faith. What do you understand by the term good faith? Good faith is where both the parties, they communicate in a very positive way. The idea over here is when both the parties communicate, they want a mutual consent. They want both the parties to benefit out of the agreement what arises after the negotiation. It is not that one party should gain and another party should lose. So the idea over here is, if one compromise is made somewhere, you're gaining something instead of that compromise. So this is what is happening in terms of good faith, and it's a very positive way in which the negotiation happens. On the other hand, strike means what happens? In strike, one person will win, one person might lose. But in collective bargaining, we are trying our best. There are chances where here also person will lose, but we are trying our best where both the parties should come to a mutually agreeable understanding. Okay, both of them should come to a mutually agreeable contract. So this is how collective bargaining works. What are the features of collective bargaining? So the first feature of collective bargaining over here is it is a group process. So here you see, I'm in this photo what is given here, in this picture what is given, you have representatives of the workers and the representatives of the management who sit together and negotiate with each other to come to a mutually beneficial agreement. And it is a process. Collective bargaining is called as a process because, see here, it comprises of certain steps like preparing the negotiations, or the workforce will put forth their demands in the form of a charter. So that is the first step in which the bargaining occurs. Then you have the actual negotiation that is taking place. You might have third party involvement. You might have an impasse. Impasse means you're not able to come to an agreement. Okay. Or finally, the final stage of the collective bargaining process will be where an agreement is arrived at between both the parties, and a certain contract is created which is going to be the law that will regulate the labor regulations in that company. Okay, so this is the reason, and there are a series of procedures to be followed if it's called as collective bargaining. It has somewhere about 5-6 steps to qualify as collective bargaining. Then we have negotiations. As I had already told you, the negotiations take place where each of the party tries to convince the other party, tries to make some compromises in order to gain other benefits. So it should be like a give and take policy occurs in terms of these negotiations. Then finally, we have something called as a bipartite agreement. Bipartite means what? Bi, which means two. There are two parties which is involved. A third party is not there in this case. So you have one party which is the representatives of the management, another party which is the representatives of the workers. Then finally, you have something called as a power relationship. Depending upon that party who has more power, they will end up getting the advantage, and they will end up getting the benefits in collective bargaining. So for example, supposing a negotiation is happening between the representatives of the workers and the representatives of the management. So what happens here is, supposing the management is having people in its mind. In case the existing workers are threatening to strike or something like that, the management will easily be able to replace these workers. Or in case the present workers are negotiating too much and asking for too many terms and conditions, in that case, the management can always bargain with these workers and can always mention these workers that in case you keep continuing with the negotiations in this way, then I will dismiss you people and instead I will take some other people in your position. So in this way, the party who has more strength is going to ultimately win the collective bargaining negotiations. So here you have the process of collective bargaining. So basically there are somewhere about 5-6 steps involved, out of which like 4 steps are extremely relevant here. See, first part of it speaks about preparing for negotiations. So while you are preparing for negotiations, there are certain protocols to be observed here. What are those protocols that you need to observe? The first one is when both the parties, that is the representatives of the trader, the representatives of the workers, as well as the representatives of the management, when both these parties go to the bargaining table to negotiate, both of them should have done their homework. Now, what do I mean by homework over here? They should have collected, at least when I'm speaking about the management aspect, the management point of view, they should have collected sufficient data and information. What sort of information are they supposed to collect? Have a look at this first point here. They need to collect information relating to the pay rates. What is the rate of pay in your company in comparison to what is the rate of pay in other companies also in that industry? Okay, so this comparative pay rates, if you're having with you, you may be able to have a proper ground for bargaining. Now, that's not the only one which is sufficient. You can have a look at the second point here. There is something called as earnings versus the costs that might be incurred. The company will have to compile a data of its earnings. Okay, so supposing the company is having less profits, it is having less earnings over the few years, then it can always tell its laborers that uh, since our earnings are less, it's because of that only we are able to pay you only so much. The workers may also be having their own information. They may say, so and so XYZ industry is paying us well, why can't you pay us sufficiently? So the company can say XY industry is paying their workers well because XY industry's earnings are this much, but our earnings are just this much. So because of which we are able to pay only according to our earnings. You work well, you be more productive, you increase our earnings, we will automatically give you better wages. So this is one of the ways in which this negotiation can take place. Okay, so if you have sufficient data regarding your earnings and what another competitor might be earning, and you also need to have sufficient data regarding the costs. So what are the costs that are incurred? In case you agree to the workers' demands, what will be the extra costs be if you agree to the workers' demands on increasing the wages? If those extra costs are incurred, will it affect your earnings? All these decisions has to be made and communicated to the representative of the workers in the collective bargaining procedure. Then another interesting way in which you can prepare yourself. See, many times what happens is when the workers put forth their demands, it is done ex tempo. In other words, they would not have given any kind of notification to the management on what issue they are going to ask demands. So it is a good idea if the management forecasts beforehand itself what the workers are going to ask from you. Accordingly, you need to prepare the information and the negotiations that you are going to give with the workers, the representative of workers over here. Now, this is possible by way of predicting demands based on grievances of workers. So what you can do is you can just have a look at some of the workers' grievances. If many of them are having similar grievances, similar problems regarding the company or any issues that they are facing with the company or grievances, then the companies, the management can predict, okay, so and so are the grievances, so this is what they are going to ask us in the bargaining table, we have to be prepared for it. Then you can also go by the superior's feedback. See, the worker supervisor will be there, the trade union supervisor will be there. You can ask the supervisor whether these people are facing any issues. Have they been discussing something amongst themselves which the supervisor knows? So all this interrogation, if you do to the supervisor also, you may get some information on what subject issues the workers are going to try to negotiate with us. Then you have another interesting way where you can collect information on the possible grounds for negotiation. You have something called as attitude surveys. So what do we understand by attitude surveys here is, the company will probably send out questionnaires or will send out interviewers to speak to each of the workers and find out their opinion on certain terms of the labor contract. What is, for some of the questions can be as follows. What is your opinion on the wages that you are earning? Supposing most of the workers are replying as very poor opinion, or they are unsatisfied with the wages, you can predict that, okay, if these people are going to negotiate something which is, it is about the wages only. Or in case most of them are saying the lack of transport, in this case also, whenever the bargaining occurs, you can predict, okay, these people are going to ask us for transport options, which you have to be prepared to answer. Okay, so in this way, by making attitude surveys also, you can make certain predictions. And finally, you have consultation. You can consult some of the employees in the lower level management, out of which the supervisor, the worker supervisor is one of them, and many other parties also you can actually consult to find out whether they know some information about what the workers are planning to demand. Then have a look at the second point here, the bargaining items. Bargaining items can be many. As I've already discussed with you, it can relate to transport facilities, it can relate to canteen facilities, wages, bonus, medical insurance. So there are many things which they can bargain for. Or it may even be a kind of a protest against terminating some other worker who is there in the trade union. Supposing the company is dismissing somebody from the trade union, is dismissing one worker, all the other workers may join into protest. Okay, so we will see a case study on this after another few slides from now on. Then the third aspect is the negotiation. Negotiation, we have already discussed what exactly is negotiated. Finally, after all these things happen, during the process of negotiation, either both the parties will come to a mutually benefiting agreement, or something called as an impasse will occur. An impasse is a situation which is like a stalemate. Both the parties are not arriving at a decision. Both the parties are not willing to compromise on any issue. So it is not something which you can easily talk and negotiate or settle the matter. This is where a third party has to be brought in to settle the disputes between both the parties. So third party involvement usually encompasses either mediation or arbitration. So first let us have a look at what we understand by the term mediation. Mediation is a situation where there is a third party who is involved, and that third party is a neutral third party. He neither supports this guy nor does he support this guy. He is neutral to both of them. So what this third party will do is he will have a separate discussion with one of the parties to the dispute. So let us say this is the representative of the management. He will have a separate discussion with them. Based on his discussion, he will try to understand what position the management is in. Then he will have another separate discussion with the representatives of the workers. Then he will understand what is where exactly these people are standing. From this, they will come to a conclusion as to where each of these parties are standing in terms of their negotiations. Based on the information that this person has collected from both the parties, the mediator will try to find one common ground based on which further negotiations can occur. Based on that, they will try to settle their differences. Now, please understand one thing, this mediator, he is here just to help settle the difference between both these parties, but he cannot enforce his judgment or his decision on either of these parties. He is here just to act as a link between these two guys in terms of communication and gathering information and trying to find a new ground based on which negotiation is possible. Next, have a look at the next type of third party involvement. There is something called as arbitration. Arbitration again involves a third party, but there is a difference over here. In arbitration, what happens is this third party who comes into the picture, who tries to settle the dispute between these guys, has the power to enforce his decision or judgment on these two people. So, based on the information he has collected from this representatives of management, and based on the information that he has collected from this representative of workers, he will use his own judgment and arrive at a decision which he feels is probably best for both of them. This decision has to be accepted by the management as well as by the workers. This is the difference between mediation and arbitration. So he has the right to impose his judgment on both the parties. In mediation, he cannot impose a judgment, but in arbitration, he can impose a judgment. Now, so here, I would just like to discuss one small case study here regarding the use of mediation in settling a strike. So this is a case study where a strike had occurred in the Sanand facility of Tata Motors in Gujarat. Okay, so this was basically the production facility where these Tata Nano cars were being manufactured. Now, what happened over here is this management, the Tata Motors management found 26 workers to be guilty of a certain issue. So they were charging these 26 workers on grounds of misconduct and accused them of having damaged about 50 vehicles in the plant. So that is their accusation against this 26 workers. They say that they were not doing their work properly and they were behaving in a very hooliganish way, due to which 50 vehicles which were in the process of production had got damaged. So based on this accusation, these 26 workers had got suspended. Now, the repercussion of this suspension was a strike. Just because 26 of their colleagues had got suspended, all the workers together started striking against the management of Tata Motors. You may be wondering, if 26 people are going here, why the rest of them should strike for them? The reason is job insecurity. These people felt that without conducting a proper inquiry, without trying to understand the point of view of these 26 workers, without trying to make an investigation, abruptly they have just been suspended. So this had started imbibing some kind of job insecurity in the remaining workers. If it is happening to those 26 people, tomorrow it can happen for us also. So this is the attitude what the remaining workers had, and eventually they all launched into a strike. So when this strike had happened, the details regarding the strike are as follows. So totally 422 workers had joined in the strike and demanded the reinstatement of the suspended workers. So they demanded that these 26 people have to be taken back to this factory. And apart from this, they made one more further demand. They demanded that their wages should be improved. Their wages should be revised and their salary should be improved. So the strike had started off. Eventually, the company decided to resort to a labor court. So a third party came into the picture. They took the services of the labor court, and a labor commissioner was the one who was the third party who tried to settle the differences between these two. So initially they made attempts to settle the differences, but it did not work. Then later a mediation took place. It was a situation where certain representatives of the workers and certain representatives of the management and this labor commissioner, all these people sat together and made discussions for a span of 8 hours. Then, after 8 hours of discussion and negotiations, finally a settlement was reached. So please understand, over here the settlement is, see, one person is not fully compromising, one person is not fully benefiting. Both the parties are compromising on a certain issue and instead they are taking benefit for another issue. Okay, so what is the compromise and what is the benefit? We will just have a look at over here. What is the reason why the strike was there? 26 people you have suspended, bring them back to the company. The company accepted, okay, we will bring back 13 of those people. Half of the workers whom we suspended, we will bring back. and we agree to your demands of increasing the wages. In return, the laborers, the workers, they called off the strike, they stopped the strike and they started working in the factory. And the company also said that give a charter of your demands within 4 to 6 months on how much wages exactly you expect. Based on that, we will make a decision and give you the wages. So eventually this was the compromise which was arrived at. So what is the compromise here? The workers were asking for all 26 of them to come back to work. They compromised that, okay, if you're not asking 13 people to come, it's okay, but at least 13 people you're taking. So the workers compromised the 13 people who were suspended. And the company's compromise was what? We will accept 13 people and we will accept your demands for wages, but you have to make certain a charter of your demands, and that will also be based on your output. If your productivity is good and output is good, then we are very happy to give you the wages that you are demanding. Okay, so in this way, the mediation had happened and the strike was called off and the dispute was resolved. Okay, so with this, I have completed your fifth module. You just have one more chapter left, which is the sixth module. I will see you guys in the next video regarding the sixth module. Thank you.